Hi everybody, my name's Andrea and I'm the potter, and I normally teach the pottery classes in the Island Arts Centre, but as we're closed at the minute, we're bringing the classes straight into your home. Okay, so today what we're going to be making is a little buzzy bee. Okay, so hopefully in your crate you will have got your board. I have that set out in front of me. You'll have got two sticks which are guides. You'll have a flat side, a slightly curved side. So the flat side sits on your board and they sit a distance apart. And if I tilt the camera down, you will see that when the rolling pin rests on those, it stops, these guides stop the rolling pin going down too thin, so that your clay that's caught between the rolling pin and the board will only be as thick as the guides, which is the perfect thickness for our Buzzy Bee today. Okay, so you just need to remember that your rolling pin is always on both ends, is sitting on the guides. If you can remember when you're rolling, just to roll within the board, don't go out beyond the board, because then you'll touch the length of the guides that's not supported on the board and they'll flip up. Okay, so in your clay crate, you will have this little tub, and in there are all the colors that we need today. Okay, so I'm going to take those out. And this little tub here, I could ask you to put just a little bit of water in it, not loads, because we don't want spilling. This is just for washing brushes. Okay, just a little bit of water. And if you can have a damp cloth at hand, you'll find that it's very, very handy just for containing the dust on your hands. Sometimes the clay feels like it's drying your hands out a lot, and it's always handy to have a little damp cloth just to wipe against your hands. Okay, so the little tubs that I've set aside, I'm just going to explain to you the colors that we're going to be using today, and then we'll put the lids back on and then we'll use them in a little while. So you should have three colors. One is white, very obviously white. One is black, it looks a little bit on the grey side, and one is yellow, and it should look nice and yellow. Okay, these are fireable colour. That means that they can go in the potter's kiln, which is our potter's oven, and the colour will not burn off. They are made up of clay and water and then the colour. So they're actually a clay, like a liquid clay. So these are called slips. These will fire up a little bit differently, and so I have little colour discs just to show you what they look like in the end. The yellow will become a lot more vibrant. You can see it's slightly dull looking as a slip, but when it fires up and it has its glassy glaze on, it's beautiful yellow. Okay, the black is definitely less grey and much richer black. Okay, so our grey then looks much more like a black. And our pure porcelain white becomes very, very white. Okay, so this is the colour that the clay will become, and this is the porcelain white. Okay, so on our plate, on our little Buzzy Bee, you can see this is our porcelain, and our yellow slip and our black slip. So they're the three colours for today. And this is the colour that the clay will become, a lovely cream colour. So I'm going to put the lids back on our colour now that we know what they are. And I'm going to ask you to get your clay out of your plastic bag. And you'll find that it is a little bit slippery and a little bit wet from sitting in the bag. Okay, so it might be a bit shimmery. And what I need you to do is to take that shimmer off it just by handling it. Okay, so I don't want you to change the shape. I want it to stay a circle. So no squashing and squishing into the clay, because that will put little air bubbles in the clay. And those air bubbles, when they're heated up in my potter's oven, in my kiln, the water in that air will just heat up, and they will jet out and they will take little bits of your pottery out. Okay, so we don't want our pottery to break. So we always keep it a nice circle, so we can pat it in our hands or we can roll it on the board. You'll see a lot of the water gets transferred onto the board. Okay, so once you're happy that you've taken the sticky off and passed it onto your hands, so the heat of your hand is sort of absorbing that water, or it looks as if it's absorbing the water, it's just drying the water out. Okay, we're ready to roll. So in your crate, you'll also get your templates. So they're little cardboard shapes of the things that we're going to be cutting out. Okay, so it's either one of these. Okay, so you have this one is going to be the shape of the Buzzy Bee. We also have a smaller one like this, which is a wing. Okay, so it's either one of these. Okay, we need our clay to be as big as that. So every so often, just keep bringing that over and setting it down and saying, have I got my clay big enough for this? Okay, we'll know when we're completely finished when the rolling pin won't roll the clay any thinner because it's touched the guides. But what we don't want is a really, really long strip that doesn't make the width of our template. So what we keep doing is we keep turning our clay. So first off, I'm just going to get you to take your hand and I'm going to pat it down. Okay, so that's going to feel like it wants to stick to your hand, and quite often it sticks to the board as well. You can see it's left a lot of water behind. So I'm going to do that again. Just give it a gentle tap. This will warm up your hands and take off any last little bits of sticky on the clay. And again, remember, it's going to want to stick. Okay, so sometimes you might feel a bit of a pull where the water of the clay is trying to sort of grip onto the board. So we're ready to roll. It's not a race. It's really important that you take your time with the rolling and that you do it gently at first. If you start off so strong and heavy, you might end up with a really big thick bit in the middle and then this wee skinny bit. Sometimes that creates like these waves, that then it's a big thick bit of clay waves over and gets caught in the thinner piece of clay, and you can sometimes trap air bubbles in that. So what we're going to do first is we just set it in the middle and just give it a gentle roll out to the ends. Okay, I just stop close to the ends. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift it, because you know with the pressure of us rolling, it's maybe going to stick to the board. So, oh yeah, this is definitely stuck. And I give it a turn. Okay, then I'm going to roll it from the center out to the edge. Okay, then I'm going to lift it and give it a turn. So you can see what we're doing, taking our time, starting in the center, rolling out to the edges, and then lifting and turning our clay. Okay, this ensures that we get a circly shape, which is exactly what we want for our template. Okay, you can see we're based mostly on a circle. We just need a little bit longer at the ends. Okay, so rolling it, and lifting and turning. Okay, so we're getting there. Slowly but surely we're getting there. Lift and turn. And keep going, lift and turn, and back to the center, roll out to your edges. Okay, if you start off with always in the center, it just means that you're pushing the clay out nice and evenly. Okay, so start in the center, out to your edges. I'm going to check in a minute and see how my clay is getting on. Okay, I'm using recycled clay, and I've noticed a couple little air bubbles in mine. You won't have air bubbles in yours. Okay, because yours is not recycled, yours is straight from the bag. Okay, whereas I use up all our little scraps from my demonstrations. I want to see how we're getting on here, because I'm getting a bit worried that I'm just not going to make this tail. I'm definitely making the length of it, or the width of it, but the length is maybe a little bit short. So I don't need to roll this way anymore. I need to roll it a little bit longer. So to do that, I'm going to turn it like this, because when you roll, it rolls this direction. Okay, so I know I'm nearly there. This little tiny bit at the bottom needs done. And I know I'm getting quite close to the end of my roll of my clay. So you can see I just need a little bit longer. So you can see what I'm doing. I keep looking at the size of the clay to make sure it's going to fit my template. Okay, so the last little bit of roll that I need is just on the length. I'm not sure if you can see that it's just squishing out the tiny last bit. And I'm pretty sure that should be perfect. Okay. I just keep rolling and rolling to make sure that it's definitely down, but there's nothing, I can't see any movement in my clay, so I know I've got it down as thin as it needs to be. Okay, so you know with every roll, it's going to want to stick to the board. So we really need to lift this up. Now, if you think it's really, really big and you want to lift it up entirely, I lift up half, set it down, go to the other side, lift up half, set it down. Okay, let's see, does it fit? Yes, it does. Okay, so it does depend on which template you have with you. There'll be a dull side, which will sort of absorb the water a little bit easier, and a shiny side. Okay, so with this template, it's the white side. I've got some templates here with this kind of backing. This is the shiny side. This is the absorbent side. You always want the shiny side looking up at you, because shiny will stick to clay. Okay, so we want to put the bit that's not shiny against the clay. That makes sense? Okay, so I'm going to set that on, and in our box of tools, we'll find this little stick. Okay, it's got a nice pointy bit, and we're going to use that as our knife and our pencil today. Okay, and our scraper. It's got lots and lots of different jobs to do today. If we push it down like this into the clay, it will cut through the clay. Okay, so when you hold it like that, it's kind of like a cutting tool, because the sharp point just slips through the very soft clay and cuts. Once we have the template sitting down, it becomes a resting guide for the stick, okay, or our knife. I hold the stick at the bottom because it is a bit wobbly. So if you hold it at the bottom, it doesn't bend or break. and you draw around this cardboard template. But you're pushing down also so that it is touching the board underneath. That means you're cutting out. Okay, so I'm just going to show you that this bit is cut away. Can you see that? Okay, so I keep one hand on the template just so it doesn't wobble around, so I get a really nice shape. And I'm going to continue on. Okay, take your time, draw all the way around, leaning on the template so that you've got that lovely shape. Okay, so I'll turn that so you can see the last bit of cutting. So I can feel if I try to bend or hold stick there, I can feel it bending. So I'm going right down to the bottom as if it's a pencil. I'm going to draw all the way around. Okay. And that's us. Now, all of these scraps are so important, so don't smush those up. Okay, what I need you to do is I'm going to show you how to reuse some of the clay. I need you to take it off in strips. So I'm maybe going to break it about that, have that much. I'm going to go for about that much. Okay, I'll set it beside it. I'll not set it on top just yet. And I think I've got about 4 bits left. All right, so I'm going to show you in a minute what to do with those. But I want to just check that I've got all my edges nice and neat. Leave the template in place and then have a little look and make sure, have I got all of this cut out right? Is there bits that maybe are just not close enough to the template? But I'm pretty happy that I've got a nice cut edge. I've got all those little scraps off. Then I can take this off and I should have my main Buzzy Bee building. Okay. These bits are going to be the wings. Okay, so I'm going to actually show you what to do with those now. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get you to lift this up, turn it over, and I'm going to get you to write your name on the underside of it. Okay, now when you're using your stick, remember if you go like this, it'll cut. So you have to tilt it slightly on the side so that you're not digging it down through the clay. When you tilt it on the side, it's only sitting on this side of the stick, not the very, very sharp pointy bit, but on the side. And again, holding it like a pencil, and you're just going to write in clay. So I need your name to be nice and big so that I can see who made the plate and then get that back to you. So I'm going to make my name really nice and clear. So I take it nice and light to begin with. If I feel I need to lean a little bit harder, I can, but I definitely don't want to cut through. Okay, so be very careful. I'm kind of leaning this hand on my clay so that it sort of stops me digging down too deep because my hand's kind of relaxed. Okay, nice and big so I can clearly see. And even if it gets softened slightly, when I turn it over, I'll definitely be able to see that name. Okay, nice and big and clear. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to just move that to one side. Okay, I'll put a little bit of blue paper in your crate and then you can just lift this Buzzy Bee up and set it down on the blue paper. Okay, now you've got your board ready to take care of our scraps. Now I said right at the very beginning, we can't mash clay together because we can create air bubbles in that and then that makes the clay blow up. But we can carefully blend the clay together. Okay, sort of laminate it together in layers, making sure that we're pushing the air out all the way, okay, and not trapping it. So if I just went like this and I pushed it down, I might trap air in there. But if I take it like this, okay, you can see I've got this nice shape. And if I just press from one side, I'm pushing the air out all the way out here. But I'm pushing the clay together. So I start here and I work my way all the way over. Okay, now I've got a lot of bumps on that, but the underside should have less because it was touching a flat board. So I'm going to take another piece of clay and maybe make it slightly smaller. And I'm going to do the same thing. Start here, pat, 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 all the way to the edge, give it a turn. Next bit of clay, start at one side, pat, 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 pat. I'm going to give that a little pat and turn it over to the flattened end. And we'll add these bits. So start at one side, pat, 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 tap. So you can see we're layering it together. Turn it over. This piece, start at one end, pat, 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 pat. Okay, give it a tap. What I think I might do is I might just break this in half and add one layer, one big chunky layer on top of this. So start here, pat, 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 pat. Okay, so I patted that all together and now I'm going to roll that out. Okay, so we want to get enough clay to cut 2 of these because these are our little wings. Okay, so you can see if I just roll this out a little bit longer, it'll fit, and I'll have enough space here. Okay, to do the second. So I'm going to start off lightly again because I really want to blend these layers together. So I'm start rolling right on the top, backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. Just taking my time, and hopefully you won't see any air bubbles. Okay, and just lift it to make sure that it's not sticking. You can even turn it over and see how it's laminating well on this side. If you want, you can roll it on this side to really make sure you're smoothing out all those different layers. Start in the center, roll out to your edges. Okay, that feels good. You can see I'm not getting any further with that. So this bit has just a couple of little lines on it. I'm going to use this side instead. I prefer that side. Now let's see. Can I get one cut out and leave enough space on the other side? So you'll have one wing, and what you do is you cut it out and then flick it over. But I'm just going to show you, because I've got the 2 variations of the templates, that you'll clearly, with your scraps, get enough for 2 wings. Okay. If you cut it out right from the middle, you'll have to do the whole process again. Okay, laminating these 2 bits together so that you get enough clay again for the second wing. So it makes sense when you're cutting out to cut from an edge, leaving all of this for the second wing. Okay, so just as we've done before, you're going to put your stick in, you're going to draw all the way around, finger on the top just to make sure that doesn't wobble about on you, stick held down at the bottom so it doesn't snap, and that should be 1 wing cut out. Okay. Okay, remember this is the non-absorbent side. We don't want to put the rice snap side down because it's very glossy, it feels shiny, and that would stick slightly. If by accident you do, you just need to prise it apart. Okay, you might find that it does stick quite a bit, and if it does do that and you've mashed your clay, just do the layering again and get your clay down to a nice even sheet. If you do see any air bubbles, do what I did with my first piece of clay. If I see a little bubble, and you'll see it in the clay, you just take your stick and just pierce it from the side, and then I just push the air out. Okay, so ready for my second wing. I'm going to draw around. It's a little bit fiddlier because it's smaller, so take your time with this. Okay, nearly done, sorry. So one should be able to see. Okay, but I'm definitely finding that one a little bit fiddlier. Okay, so we'll take these scraps away. Okay, so I don't need these ones. Well, I need a little bit. I don't need it all, but I do need a little bit. So I'm going to keep them nice and moist. Okay, and I'm going to keep them over here. They can be in your bag. They can be on your bag. They can just be out of the way. Okay, away from the hairdryer. Okay, so we'll be using that a little while. And I'm just going to peel that. Okay, so these are my 2 wings. Now, what I find with the wings is that they're a bit chunky looking. They're not nice and soft, like the thin quality of a Buzzy Bee wing. So I do want to soften them slightly, and this is where your damp cloth comes in handy. Now I just need to reach for my damp cloth, so if you haven't got your damp cloth, you just go get your little damp cloth, just well squeezed out, just a tiny bit of water in it. We don't want it dripping or soaking. Okay, so this is my damp cloth. You see, if I squeeze it, no water will come out, but it makes my hands nice and damp. Okay, so that's perfect for softening the edge. Okay, so that's what we're going to do for our next job. Dampen our finger or thumb. Okay, sometimes it's my pointing finger, and Peter Pointer works really well. Sometimes it's my thumb. I think because these are small and delicate, I'm going to use my Peter Pointer, nice and damp, and I'm just going to soften lightly around the edge. Okay, so I don't want to push too hard because I don't want it to mash and lose its shape. And I don't want it to stick to the table either, or to the board. So it's just a little damp finger rubbed around. And that one's done. I'm going to do the next. Okay, so they look a little bit softer because I've taken that hard cut edge off them and made them look a little bit softer and rounder on the edge. Okay, so that's my 2 wings done. I'm going to lift them up, make sure they haven't stuck, set them to one side. Okay, so just going to sit in the corner of my board, and I'm going to get my Buzzy Bee back. Okay, so here he is. If I can show you on our finished plate, what we want to do is we want to mark where the head is and the bands of colour, okay, and the stinger at the bottom. And we can do that with our stick, okay? Now remember, we don't need to cut any of these lines in. We're just going to mark them slightly so we know where to paint. So to do that, you could almost be laying the stick down, okay, and just pressing it in lightly, really lightly. It's just leaving a mark behind, nothing else. Okay, so there's a little line. Hopefully you can see that little line. I'm going to do, that's the head done. Okay, then I'm going to go down to the bottom. I want the stinger, so just lightly press it. Really be careful, no hard pressing, or it will just act like a cheese wire or a clay cutter and it'll just snap that little bit off. Okay, so really nice and lightly. Okay, so then you're going to decide how many stripes does your little Buzzy Bee want. In your clay crate, you've got a nice broad brush, and I really like this broad brush. Okay, you can see it's quite big for doing the stripes and the bands. On mine, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so that would be 4 lines we need to do. So that would be 1. You just decide if you want your thicker, you can, and they really don't need to be dug in very deep at all. Okay, maybe we'll go for about that one now, and hopefully your stick is just the right length. Okay, so this really helps when it comes to painting. Okay, next one. Okay, just a light indication of where you want to paint, and then my last little one here. So 1, 2, 3, 4 lines I've used to give me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 little bands. Okay, so colour will be coming very soon, but the very last thing we want to do with our scraps are these little antennae. If you can see the little antennae on the top of the Buzzy Bee head, and we'll need some of our scraps for this. Now our scraps have been used a lot, which is why I said put them on plastic or keep them off the board. They're quite dry, so I'm going to dampen my hand quite a bit, and I'm going to take a little piece of clay and I'm just going to transfer some of the water from my hand onto that clay to keep it nice and moist. And I'm going to make a bead. Okay, so if your hands feel like they're drying out at all, just dampen them and put the bead right in the center, and you can roll it around. Now I've made my hand so slippy it's rolling everywhere. Okay, and I want to make a long worm with that. So you can use it, you can roll it with your finger and use your palm and just roll a little bit with just your finger. Because your hand, you can kind of feel, you know, you've got a sensation of feeling in your hand. You can sort of feel if you're pushing too hard. And I just roll it with my finger. Okay, and that might be enough for my antennae. Okay, sometimes when I use the board, I roll really, really flat. I'm going to show you with the next one, me rolling on the board as well. But while this is still nice and damp, this little antennae, I'm going to twirl it. Okay, so I've got a skinny end because when I was rolling, I kind of tried to roll it a little bit more to one side. Can you see? Now that might take a little bit of practice, but look how much scrap you've got. So you've plenty that you can be practicing with, okay? So once I have this rolled, I've got slightly thicker end and slightly skinnier end. I take the skinny end and I just start to twirl it. Really fiddly. So I twirl it around. Now, if your clay is at all dry, it will break and crack here, which is why the damp cloth is so important, because it's just, the clay has just lost a little bit of water. Okay, so hopefully you can see what I've done. I've tried to twirl that around and make a little antennae. Okay, so that will be placed there on the Buzzy Bee head, okay, where I've left these little indentations. Okay, so let's try that again. Nice damp hand. I'm going to use the board this time, let you see. So I'm going to dampen the board because the board, as you know, will absorb all the water from the clay. So I'm going to take another bead, little lump of clay, make a bead in the center of my hand. Okay, now I'm going to try and roll it on the table. So I'm still going to use one finger. I'm just going to roll it. When I start rolling it, it looks a little bit like this shape, a little tube kind of shape. I'm going to make it a little bit of a longer tube. That's nice and wet. You can see that the clay's marking the table. So it's maybe absorbing some of the water that I put on the board rather than the board absorbing the water from the clay. Okay, so now it's a longer tube. Now I'm going to focus a little bit of my rolling on one side only. Okay, so I just move my finger along. So you see that this bit just doesn't get rolled because my finger isn't long enough. And I'm going to roll just that end bit. It's a bit like a carrot shape. And then it just gets a really long carrot shape. If you push really hard, it's going to go flat. Okay. So if you're feeling, oh no, mine's gone flat, just ease off or start again and just do it lighter with your rolling. Okay, that does take a bit of practice. I think maybe I want to roll this last bit a little bit more because it does look a little bit thick. So this is my shape. And then if I'm going to curl it, I just curl it around. It's a bit fiddly. See how it's twirling? And just keep going. Going, a lovely natural form. So we have this. Okay, and I'm going to set that in place as well. I think I'll turn it that way. I'm going to show you that on the board. Okay, so I like the antennae when the flat bit is here and they're twirling out. It's going to be contained. You know the way that when you're doing antennae, they tend to extend beyond the bee. That will become very brittle and break off. So for the safety of the piece, I'm going to get you to put them entirely on the flat Buzzy Bee head so that it's completely and utterly supported. Okay, otherwise bits do fall off. Okay, so we want to make sure they stay on for forever. So I'm going to need that little container of water. And I'm going to show you how to join the antennae to the head. Okay, so using our stick again as a knife, I'm using the pointy bit and I'm going to do an X marks the spot where I want that antennae to go. Okay, let's see if you can see that nice and clearly. Okay, I've got X marks the spot and I'm going to X a few more times just so that it's really well broken up surface. I'm going to, that's how I want it to go on. So I need to make one broken surface touch another broken surface. So the back of this is going to get a little bit of scrapes. And again, for scraping, this, the stick goes all the way, you know, it's straight, goes straight down into the clay. So it's going to be one broken surface touches another broken surface. You should have a slightly smaller paintbrush in your crate. I'm going to reach for that. And this is going to be good for joining these on. So a little bit of water, just dipped in my water. I'm going to dip a bit of water on there, or you can dip it there. It's up to you. And I'm going to place those scratches together. Now, if I just sit them together, they'll just sit like this. But if I give it a press, they'll lock together. So without distorting the antennae swirl that you've worked so hard to make, I'm just going to press that gently into place. Okay? So I'm going to show you that again if you've missed that. So it gets a little bit squashed, but not terribly squashed. Okay? So if you've missed that antennae bit, you want to see that one more time. I'm going to clean all the clay off my stick. Okay, I'm going to take away my antennae and X marks the spot. Okay, you see a nice X. Then I'm going to really give it a little bit more of a scraping with the stick straight down. Okay, the antennae, if it's going on like that, this is my good side, so I turn it over and I do some scraping on the back, the surface that's going to touch the Buzzy Bee head. Okay, one little dip of water, either on the scratches there or here. I've done it on the head, and then I'm going to put it on. Okay, so this is the scratches, touching the scratches, and I want that antennae to start there and twirl like that. You see how the starting is here, and then it twirls around. So it's just sitting on. If it's just sitting on, it can easily fall off. If I give it a little press, without distorting the antennae too much, I will put those cross hatches together and they will lock together. Okay, excellent job. Right, painting time. So what we're going to do is we're going to paint it, we're going to dry it, and then we're going to put the wings on, because it's really difficult to try and paint around these delicate wings. Okay, so the best thing to do is paint the whole Buzzy Bee first, then we'll add the wings and then paint them. Okay, or if you want, you can paint these separately and then put them on as painted ones. We could maybe try that and see how well that works. Okay, so our black and our yellow are what we're going to use first. I prefer starting off with the yellow, okay? The black is really, really dark and it will cover over any yellow bits that kind of maybe went a little bit too far onto the black area. Whereas if we start off with the black, you might find that if it's gone onto the yellow, trying to put the yellow over it is just messy, okay? So the best way to start off is with your yellow. Now, I would stir your yellow slip a little bit because it's just clay and water. And the clay, sometimes because it's heavier than the water, goes to the bottom and the water rises to the top. So a good stir is always a good idea, okay? So we know that the stinger is going to be black. So the first band up from there is going to be yellow. Okay, and I just brush it on. Okay, nice broad brush should just about fit the bands. Go a second time just to the edge. It's a bit wobbly. Try that again. Okay, so it's really light and I'm doing a big like brush across. Okay, so if that one's going to be, that's going to be black. That's going to be black, that's going to be yellow, that's going to be black, that's going to be yellow, then that means that the head can be black without having a black band beside it. Okay, so ready for that's going to be left black, ready for this one that's going to be yellow. Okay, I'm going to dip in a second time. So that one dip nearly did it, but not quite. And I go really light this time because I don't really want to take off that first bit that I put on. I just want to strengthen it up. And as I say, it's okay to go on the black, because the black is much, much stronger and it will cover over the yellow, okay? Leaving this one black, or 4 black, and moving on 1 to do the yellow. Okay, a nice big dip in, straight across, dip in again, and fill in the bits that you didn't get. Okay. And it's okay to go over your lines a bit, okay? I've gone over that line a bit, and you'll see that it doesn't matter when you put the black on. Okay, so we can't do the black right away, or it will definitely mix with this wet yellow. So what we need to do is we need to hair dry it. The slip, the yellow slip, is very glossy and shimmery at the minute. What you do is you lightly hair dry it until you can't see that shimmery shine anymore, okay? If you want to, you can just lightly touch it as you're hair drying it to see, does it transfer to my finger? Obviously, if you lean really, really hard, you're going to lift the yellow off and then you're going to have to paint it again. But what I want you to do is just dry it enough. Don't over dry it, okay? So I'm going to start hair drying mine. My hair dryer set on quite a hot setting, so it shouldn't take too long with this, okay? So a bit of a noise, and if you're ready to hair dry it, you're going to just lightly hair dry it. When you know, hopefully you'll see, if you're watching, that I've stopped with the hair dryer, and then maybe you check yours at that stage. Now I can still see there's a bit of a shimmery shine on areas of mine. So even though I think most of it's dry, I'm going to concentrate a little bit on here, which is a bit heavier and still a bit shimmery. So if you felt like yours was nearly dry, mine does feel dry there. Okay, it's not transferring over. Okay, you could stop, okay, but I just know that there's areas here that's a bit thicker, so I'm going to continue with that. Okay, so I feel like it's now dry enough for me to touch and it not transfer over. Okay, just moving away from some sticky bits that got on the board. And now we're ready to move to the black. So what I want to do is I want to scrape this yellow paint off my brush, give it a little twirl around in the water to remove some of that yellow, and just dry off the excess water with your damp cloth. Right, so I'm ready now for the black. So that's the darkest color that you've got. Chatting about those a little bit earlier. Again, I would stir, okay, just to be sure that you're getting the nice rich color. This does seem a little bit waterier, which is really good for getting in around the antennae because I don't want to squash them too much with heavy paint brushes. Okay, so I'm going to just dab those on to the antennae, and all that juicy black should just fall in between the little twirls of the antennae. And then I'm going to carefully try and paint this bit. Now, if you feel like you want to use your skinnier brush for this, feel free. Okay, you know that one that we used for joining, this one? If you want to use that for the ends, especially the head, because it is quite small, you can use that. Okay. Helps me get that line. And it doesn't have to be a perfect line, because sometimes when you look at the little Buzzy Bees, they've got fuzzy bands of color. So don't worry too much about it being like a perfect straight line. Okay, so I've kind of run out of slip the closer I've got to you, you can see that. So you will find that sometimes especially with the black, you want it to be nice and strong, and you might need to dip in and paint a little bit more. Okay. Yeah, these are definitely a little bit wobblier lines, which I quite like. Okay, and you'll definitely see the areas where the clay is coming through that you might need to put another little bit of paint on. Remember, you're painting quite lightly. You don't want to be lifting the color of the clay. So moving on to my second band of black. Again, look, I'm running out of color. That will look grey, that won't look black. So I want to make sure that I'm putting enough color on there. Okay. There we go. And then the last little bit's the stingery bit. Again, you can use your small brush for this if you feel like the big brush just feels a little bit too big. And it's then time to hair dry that. Okay. While we are thinking about using our hair dryer, it might be a great idea to do our wings and then dry the wings at the same time. So I'm going to bring our wings in to shot. Okay. And this time we're going to be using our white, but hopefully in your clay crate you'll have a little sponge. Okay, and the sponge is great for getting that a light layer of white on the wings. So I'm just going to grab onto one end of the sponge, dip it in. You can scrape off if you feel that it's too much on, and then you can just dab that all the way around the wings, down the sides and everything. Okay, so that's one layer. I'm going to do the other so you can see that. Down around the edges. There's a second coat. I think I'm just going to go for a second coat to make them as rich and white as I can. It's a little bit heavier now. Nice squelchy noise for sponging. Okay, so I have all of my painting done, I feel. Okay, now I need to do my hair drying, because if I'm going to join these wings on, I don't want to lift the color of the white when I'm touching them, and I definitely don't want to mess up this color when I'm joining the wings. So hair drying time again. Hair drying them so that they lose that glimmery shimmer, so that you know that they're drying up but not getting too dry, because we need a little bit of flexibility in our clay for molding it into our plate. Okay, so don't worry about the sides too much. I'm seeing there's a bit of a sort of like leaky mess sometimes on the sides. Okay, if you really want to paint them, you can, but they're a little bit awkward. I would definitely use that fine brush, but you'll see with my little plate, let's see, it doesn't really matter. I've just got some leaky bits down there. I still think it looks great. Okay, So it's up to you. Okay, so now I'm going to hair dry again, taking off that shimmer and shine, not over drying it. I don't want it to look chalky and overly dry. I don't want it to look like some of the splodges on the board where it's gone really, really chalky. Okay, that means it's just too dry. And then we'll have dried our clay up so much that it won't want to bend into the plate that we've got. Okay, so if you go to your hair dryers, just lose that shimmer. That's definitely my wings done. Okay, they were closest to me, so I dried those first. So they're good. Okay, they're still, they've got like a slight stickiness to them, but the color doesn't transfer, not too much. So maybe when you're drying, you can see the edges of mine are starting to curl up a bit as they're drying, because remember, we've already dried the yellow. So I find the one wet bit of black there. There we go. Okay, so I'm happy enough. I don't want to over dry these. Okay, I can touch them and the color doesn't transfer. We're good to go. Okay, so we're going to join on our wings, and we already know how to join. Okay, our water is looking a little bit on the messy, dirty side now that we've used our brushes. So this is going to be our glue. So I think maybe I'm going to use a little bit of fresh water that I have over here for my water for joining on my wings, because I'm a bit concerned that that might leak out and leave a bit of a stain. Okay, so I have got this extra water. If you want to go and change your water, this is a good time to do that. If you still got a little bit of extra water maybe in the different container, you can reach for that. I want a nice clean brush for doing my joining. Clean out one of my brushes. Just get my water a little bit closer. So I've just got water in this little tub, and I'm ready to decide where these wings are going to go. Okay, so I think it's up to you. You decide. I want the plate to be a little bit useful, so I want to leave the center free so that I could have some, maybe some nice pieces of fruit on that if I'm using that for serving fruit. Okay, so I'd like the wings kind of to the side. They can hang out a tiny bit, but not too much. It's a bit like the antennae. They can easily knock off. Now, obviously, they're bigger and stronger than the antennae, so a little bit can hang over. But if you do it like this, I kind of would be very worried that this bit would break. Okay, so a lot of it should be on the plate with just maybe a little bit hanging over. So I'll leave it up to you. You decide. Make sure that's not too much hanging over, because they will break off. Okay, they just get knocked. Okay, they have no support from the plate. With this little guy, you can see I really don't have very much hanging over at all. If I turn him over, you see it's just the tiniest bit here, that little bit, And there's none. Oh no, there is. There's a little bit here. Okay, so very, very little bit hangover. I might be a bit adventurous and do a little bit more on this one, but I'm not sure. I don't want it to break. A lot of hard work's gone into this, so I don't really want it to break. So the pointy side goes to the top, and the rounded bit is away from the head. Okay, so if you do it that way, it kind of looks like he's got chubby top wings. Do you know, if you want the chubby top wings, you go for the chubby top wings. Okay, so I'm going to add these on. So I've set them on. I know where it's going to go. Once I take it off, I kind of work out, oh, I think it's touching about that much. You can leave a little mark on it. I'll do the same with this. So it's kind of like rough guessing. I think it's about there. Okay, so that curve there lets me know that this is where my X's need to be. Now the clay is much, much drier. So I really do need to put my stick down like this and scrape in. I'm not cutting all the way through. Remember, this is your cross hatching. You don't want to break your plate. I just want to break up the surface to create that rough surface for the two pieces to join together. I know that my wing, it probably be scratching about that much, I think, roughly. Okay, this bit's the bit that's going to hang over, and that's about as much as I would ever leave hanging over. And I'm going to scratch this. So this is the back. This is the uncolored clay side. A nice white bit, doesn't get scraped at all, because people will see that. You can see I'm doing a really good job of scratching that. Then I'm going to get some water. I'm going to dab it on. I think I'm going to dab it on both sides because they've been dried out quite a lot. So in adding the water, you're actually creating your own joining slip. Sometimes I would use joining slip, but because we're using these colors, I was concerned that it would like spread out and sort of ruin it a little bit. So in adding a water to the clay, you're sort of creating a watery clay mix, which is slip. So I'm putting these cross hatches to these cross hatches, covering up all those lines so that nobody can see the magic of the cross hatches, and I'm going to press them together. So you'll see a little bit of water oozing out. That should be clean water, which is why I use the new water, so that it doesn't dry up a color. It will just dry away. Okay, you can see how much I'm pressing on that. I really want that to join on, especially because I know I've got so much hanging over. Okay, so one more time. I've taken my stick and I've already drawn where I feel the cross hatches are going to be needed. Okay, then I'm going to scrape, holding the stick at the bottom, my lines. Let's just make sure you can see that. Lots of lines. And then my lines go the opposite way, like a grid. Cross hatch is what we really call this. And you can see I'm really going to break that up a lot. Okay, so that's it broken up. Now remember, I haven't cut through. There's no scratches on the back. It's just on that top surface. And then the wing. Where do I need to cross hatch that? I think about that much. This is the bit that will hang over, I think. Yeah. So cross hatching this. My lines, and then my lines the opposite way. And then a couple more extra just to really break up that surface. But it doesn't cut all the way through. Okay, now we're going to add our water on. You can see I'm not brushing it backwards and forwards, because if I do that, I close up the cross hatches. All I do is smooth over them, and then all my good work is undone. So dabbing on water only. Okay, and then we put those two together. So those cross hatches are going to touch those cross hatches, and we give them a good press. Don't worry if water oozes out. That just lets me know that I haven't trapped air and that the cross hatches are really locking together. Okay, give them a good press. Perfect. Okay, he's nearly done. All he needs is a little bit of gentle molding. Okay, and the mold that we're going to be using are these plastic plates. They have cling film over them, so depends which one you get. Okay, they have cling film over them because clay loves to stick to plastic, and they're just little plastic plates. But because this is such a thin layer of plastic in the cling film, I'm able to just take that off and peel that away from the back of the bee when he gets dried out. So he's going to rest in this and dry out in this, and only when he's firm do I take him out of this. Okay, so I'm going to just carefully lift him up. Okay, so if you need a helping hand with this, a good big hand underneath is a good support. Okay, and then we're going to rest him in the plate. Okay, so the plate's a bit of a square shape, but with a circle in the middle. So the squariness will support this stinger and the head and lift the wings up slightly. And it's this flat bit here that's kind of more of the plate. So this is the bit that I want to press down and make sure it's flat. And then I just work out towards the edges just to make sure that they're getting a nice flat surface and then that lovely rise up on the edges. So our name's already on the bottom, so nobody can get these muddled up. If with all the pressing you make a bit of a mess, you can always touch it up when it's in that. For one bit, I've got a bit of black flecked onto my wing, so I'm actually just going to touch that up. But I'm going to be very careful because the last thing I want to do is get my colours muddled up at this stage. But I really do like my wings being super white. Oh, well, there you go. I'm getting little flecks of white now. So I think I need to stop before I need to start repainting the whole thing. Okay, so he is just going to rest in that. Okay, he's going to come back to the studio in this mold. Once he's dried out, he's going to go into the kiln. Let's see if you can see the kiln. So this is the kiln here. Okay, this is my big oven. It's going to go into the big oven and it's going to fire up to 1,000 degrees, which is really, really, really warm. Okay, that's going to change it from clay to pottery, but it's going to be dry and dull. Okay, a bit like the back of the color tiles that I showed you earlier. These have no shine on them. They're just dry. Okay, so it needs to be dipped in glaze, which is a liquid glass. Put back into the kiln again and fired up even higher to 1,120 degrees, and that's what's going to give it the shimmery glass. Can you see the shimmer on that? Okay, so this surface here, that's what has the glass on it. Okay, and then that will finish it off and make it really shiny. There is about a 10% shrinkage, so I don't know if you can see. I'm going to have to tilt this again so you can see. This is our plate before it has been fired, and this is exactly the same one after. So you can see the shrinkage rate. There's about a 10% shrinkage rate. So they do become a little bit smaller. So you won't have to eat too much fruit to fill this lovely plate. Okay, so I need these to get back to me safe. So let's see. In our tidy up, we're going to need to put our clay scraps back in the bag. If you can tag that again, and then I can reuse those scraps and recycle them. So the next workshop that I do, the clay that I use will be all your scraps, okay, for my demonstration. Your watery tub, if we can just give that a little clean up. My black and my yellow have made a lovely greeny grey mess in there. So I'm just going to dry that one up. Okay, I need the lids on all the colour so they don't dry up. Okay, so even if you've only a little bit of colour left, you don't need to wash those up. Just put the lids on. Let's see, do I know where the other lid is? I had to keep moving my lids because when I hair dry, I can see them flying off in the distance. The hairdryer tends to want to blow these little light lids away. Okay, your sponge, if you can give that a little dry, a little wash for me, please, that would be great. Just give it a little swirl in some water. Just dry that out a bit. Okay, so that can go back in there. Now, this container can be a bit of a support or like a raised area for your plate to go into the clay crate, okay? Especially if you've got two. Two of these do not fit side by side in the bottom of our clay crate, okay? They bump into one another. So quite often what I get you to do is elevate one, raise one up on your containers, okay? So that's that one lifts up in containers. And as you're doing another one, that one, you can imagine this is this one, goes beside it, okay? So it's lower down. I'm not sure if you can see through that. So this is one plate, then your crate of slips, your little pots of slips, and then your other plate can go up here. As an extra precaution, I'll pop in a little bit of bubble wrap and it can sit just on top of the first Buzzy Bee plate that's low down. Just means that if anything wobbles around, it does tip slightly, it's padded. Okay, if you prefer to, you can just set one on top of the other with the bubble wrap, okay, as long as the slips are dry, okay, that will stop anything from rolling around. I don't think I want anything else in your clay crate other than that, okay. I suppose you can put your paintbrushes in and see what else we could get, and the stick. Okay, I don't want rolling pins, boards, or guides in that crate because they will bump into your Buzzy Bee plates. So if you can just remove the worst of the slip that's stuck to your boards, it's just a little bit of dust. And I'd like you to do that with your damp cloth. Don't soak those boards because they do warp and blister on me. Okay, so they just want a little wipe over. Okay, our guide should be clean enough. Our rolling pin might have got a bit messy. Okay, and in your little tote bag, you can just pop in your rolling pin and your guides and your template. Okay, so there's my board, my guides, rolling pin, templates, the little wings, and my Buzzy Bee all go in there, and that goes just sitting on top of your clay crate, ready for me to pick them up. Okay, so what you will find is that if it's a very, very lovely sunny Sunday when I pick these up, this doesn't need any covering. If it is raining, you could put a carrier bag around those, and then when I come to pick them up, I'll just shake the water off your carrier bag and just leave it in your letterbox, okay, just to protect them from getting too soaked. So as I say, I'll be picking them up on the Sunday, and then it takes about a week, and then I deliver them back to you all lovely and glazed. Okay, so hopefully the rest of your house isn't too messy. You've been a nice clean worker. Hopefully you've had fun with your Buzzy Bee plates, and you won't have very long until they're back to you glazed and ready for you to use. As they're handmade, I always suggest you hand wash them, especially if you've got your wings sticking out. We don't want people throwing this into the dishwasher and finding that it comes out without its beautiful wings. So please use them. Absolutely, they are going to be food safe and good to go. Even with acidic fruits, you can go ahead and eat off those. So very well done. I hope you enjoyed yourself, and thanks very much for joining me, and hopefully I'll see you again for other workshops. Okay, you take care.